Jesse, James, and Meowth, that's right, are the lovable criminals from over 1,000 episodes of the Pokemon anime, and they deserve to be in jail. See, for over 20 years, these three lovable misfits have been chasing Ash Ketchum and Pikachu across 8.5 Pokemon regions. I do not fully recognize the sovereignty of the Orange Islands. It's not a real region. But whether people like to admit it or not, this trio of hardened criminals are essentially the secondary protagonists of the Pokemon anime, appearing throughout most of the series. And with over 1,000 episodes of anime, they've committed a lot of crime, so they deserve to go to jail. But what prosecutor would be brave enough to actually tally every single crime Team Rocket has ever committed and tell you how long they should go to jail? Me. I would. And I mean, how hard could it be? I mean, it's a children's show. How many actual crimes could they commit? I'm sorry, what's that? They blew up a hospital in the very first episode. They hijacked a cruise ship. They crashed a blimp twice. All of this is in the first 100 episodes. Okay, so maybe they've done some serious crimes, but it would take a madman to actually binge through. Okay, so I've counted every single crime Team Rocket has ever committed. So let's talk about the rules of this. First off, when I say Team Rocket, I am purely referring to James, Jesse, and Meowth. That's right. We're not talking about Bark and Cassidy, we're not talking about any other Rocket Grunts that appear, and we're definitely not talking about any parallel universe Jesse, James, and Meowth. That happens. Rule number 1 is that the Pokemon world is purely fictional, and there's not really a justice system outside of a couple Officer Jennies. So to the best of my abilities, I am relating any crimes they commit to the US federal law system, and if I can't find a federal law, maybe I'll use a state law. In an ideal world, I can use the Japanese court system. I don't speak Japanese, so it'd be hard. Rule number 2 is a lot of crimes can differ in amount of jail time, for example, depending on your lawyer or depending on the situation. For the sake of argument, we're gonna act as if this lovable trio of dumbasses are going to act as their own lawyers, which seems in character, and because of that, are probably gonna receive the maximum sentence for any crime they commit. This just helps us with consistency and getting a nice big number at the end of this. Rule number 3 is double jeopardy. If it's in the same episode, we're not going to charge them for the same crime more than once. If they try to steal 50 Pokemon at once versus just stealing 1 Pokemon at once, that's 1 crime. I am not going to count every single Pokemon that gets caught in their schemes. This is also going to help when we go through the Unova and Kalos region, since a lot of their crimes there are over multiple episodes, and I'm not going to count those more than once. If it's the same scheme, that's 1 crime. Rule number 4, and this is an important one, so listen up. I am not a lawyer. I am not an expert in the law, so for the love of God, please don't take whatever I say as fact and truth or any actual legal advice. If you need legal counsel, please seek a professional help. The last thing I want is a headline in like a month where it's like, oh, a 16-year-old used advice from a Team Rocket goes to jail video in the court of law. No, don't do that. We're talking about putting a talking cat in jail here, people. With that being said, let's talk about all the crimes Team Rocket has committed. In the 1,232 episodes of the Pokemon anime, Team Rocket actually only commit crimes in 656 of them. Sometimes they're just there a lot in the earlier seasons, sometimes they're just trying to catch wild Pokemon, and in the later ones, there are a lot of episodes they just don't appear for an extended period of time. Of those 656 episodes, they have committed a whopping total of 880 crimes overall. At least ones we can charge them with, because I had to take some creative liberties here. In the Sinnoh region, they stole a skyscraper. Twice. As far as I know, there's no actual written law that says you can't steal a skyscraper, but it definitely feels illegal, right? So we'll get into how I charge that later. We're also not going to be charging Team Rocket for just talking about doing crime, because we all do that, right? With all that said and done, I have sorted these 880 crimes into 4 categories in the pie chart behind me. The largest of which is Pokemon-related crimes. These are crimes that have to do with Pokemon. The next largest little pie slice is financial crimes, which mostly involve trying to make money in some way or trying to scam someone. Then we have violent crimes, which mostly involve threats, weapons, or the destruction of property. And the smallest pie section, but arguably the most important, YAR, which is pretty self-explanatory. So to start off, let's go through their Pokemon-related crimes, since that's the one most of you are probably familiar with, the most common of which is attempting or successfully stealing a Pokemon. And all I want to say before we get into this is I think Team Rocket get a pretty bad reputation. Over the course of the entire series, Team Rocket has attempted to kidnap Pokemon 508 times, which is way less than I thought it would be. Of those 508 times, Ash's Pikachu was actually only involved in 267 of them. Now, when it comes comes to actually trying to charge Team Rocket jail time for stealing Pokemon, we have to take some creative liberties, because if you don't know, there's no law in the United States about stealing Pokemon. Pokemon don't exist. So how do you charge jail time for something that doesn't exist? Well, I'd have to relate it to something in the real world, and for that, I decided to classify Pokemon under partner animals, which would put them in the same vein as seeing eye dogs or other sort of therapy animals, which I think is fair. In the state of California, if you steal a partner animal that is valued at over $950, that counts as Grand Theft Dog. And outside of being a term I made up and Rockstar's next big franchise, it can net you a jail sentence of up to 3 years. And considering most Pokemon are super powered pets that are able to shoot lightning and breathe fire, we're going to assume they all exceed the value of $950. So even when Team Rocket is trying to kidnap frickin' wormholes of all things, that's 3 years of jail time. So starting off, we already have 1,524 years of jail. Under the Pokemon crime section, I've also included a lot of the traps Team Rocket use to try and catch Pokemon often, including pitfall traps, all of which fall under booby trap law, which is a year of jail time for the 38 times they've done it throughout the series. This is also where I've decided to include poaching, but it's really hard to say in the Pokemon anime what is and isn't poaching, because there are multiple times in the anime where Team Rocket is trying to catch a wild Pokemon and Ash decides to step in and stop them, and then later that episode Ash will catch said wild Pokemon. Either Team Rocket wasn't committing a crime and you've just assaulted them, or you're also poaching, so it's a very gray area. So I've decided to only give them a 2-year poaching charge for the times where it's specifically said that this is a protected Pokemon or the word poaching is used, which only happens like 8 times throughout the anime. Like I said, they get a bad reputation sometimes. If we add in some of the other minor Pokemon related crimes they've committed, for Pokemon related crimes alone, Team Rocket has earned 1,609 years of jail time. Holy crap. Next, let's move on to their financial crimes. Once again, financial crimes are the ones where money was actually exchanged, or Jesse, James, and Meowth, that's right, are mostly trying to just steal valuables either through scamming or straight up burglary. And they commit a lot of burglary. 52 counts of burglary, to be exact. They try to steal a bunch of miscellaneous things from trophies to bowls to whistles, just whatever they think could be sold for money, and each of these can get you about 2 to 3 years of jail time depending on the value of what you're actually trying to steal. For example, a separate 11 times throughout the series, they try and rob a museum. Mostly it happens in the Sinnoh region, but at a certain point you have to admit, they might just be good criminals if they keep breaking into museums. Like, that's genuinely impressive. It's also 20 years of jail time each. In an attempt to win prize money, trophies, or sometimes just for clout, Team Rocket will also commit a lot of contest fraud by cheating in various competitions. This includes fixing boxing matches, cheating in races, and dressing up Meowth as a Sunflora, which weirdly happens twice. Okay, I guess if you have the costume lying around already. This falls under regular fraud, and depending on the prize pool will usually net you about 20 years of jail time in a professional setting. Now, they actually don't commit too much contest fraud because there's a huge arc in generations 3, 4, and 5 where Jessie or Jezebel or Jesselina or Jessely decides to just start competing in contests as a legit coordinator without cheating at all. She eventually gains the confidence and love for her Pokemon to just compete off rip, and she's very talented. She even gets 4th place in the Sinnoh region for the grand final contest. And after becoming one of the most esteemed competitors in the world, rage quits because she didn't place in the top 3 and goes back to a life of crime. That's weird. She's a celebrity now. That's a successful career. That's like if LeBron James lost the NBA finals and the next week you find him breaking in your house to steal your dog. What? The final thing we're going to talk about in financial crimes is racketeering, because arguably this is where the majority of jail time comes from for Team Rocket. You must remember, technically Team Rocket are part of a gang, and they usually have nefarious intentions when starting any sort of business. Now, I didn't know what racketeering was before this video, like I had heard the term in mafia movies, but from what I can tell, the definition of racketeering is as follows. Racketeering is a set of illegal activities aimed at commercial profit that may be disguised as legitimate business deals, and in my mind that includes stealing Pokemon Pokemon, so all those times they've set up fake day spas, fake beauty parlors, all for the intention of taking trainers' Pokemon. That's racketeering and can net you 20 years of jail time for each repeated offense. Now I want to be clear, just because Team Rocket are criminals, it doesn't mean that every single business they start counts as racketeering, because they start a lot of legitimate businesses. Sometimes they're just unsuccessful, like when they tried to sell Pokeblocks. Most of Alola, they're just running a food truck. Meowth even points out, like, hey, we're not committing crimes anymore. We're just running a food truck successfully. All of those aren't going to be charged at all because that's ideal citizen behavior. However, it doesn't mean they haven't committed a lot of racketeering, because they have. They have 43 times by my count, which is a whopping 860 years in prison. Adding all of these racketeering charges on top of fraud, on top of burglary together, adds 1,801 years of jail time to Team Rocket's count. That is a huge amount of jail time for 3 different people, but it's gonna continue to grow, especially as we get into the more serious crimes with the violent section. Now, every time Team Rocket could be given a lifetime sentence, we are just going to give them 85 years, the average life expectancy in the United States. This is just for the sake of having a nice round number at the end, so I don't have to say, oh, 1,000 plus 8 life sentences. No, we want a number. They're gonna earn life sentences for things like, I don't know, blowing up a hospital, which they do in episode 2, and I'm not done talking about how crazy of an introduction that is. Like, Jesse, James, and Meowth at the end of the day are pretty goofy ass villains, but their introduction was what I could only call domestic terrorism. They blew up a hospital. That's a war crime! That, along with other things like, you know, taking a hostage at gunpoint, attempted murder of a police officer, attempted murder of Ash, attempted murder of random civilians, all of that's gonna get them multiple life sentences. This is also where a lot of their crimes directly against Ash are gonna be included, such as kidnapping, which they do a lot. Sometimes when they're trying to steal a Pokemon, they'll also just take a kid as well. Why not? They're free for the picking. This is about 8 years of jail time each, and they've done this around 30 different times. Speaking of direct crimes on Ash, let's talk about assaulting a child, which obviously Jesse and James have done. Now, when I'm talking about this, I only want to talk about acts where Jesse and James physically lay their hands on Ash, and I don't want to talk about just challenging him to a Pokemon battle, because in all honesty, that seems pretty fair. Like, if I was gonna get mugged, but my mugger challenged me to a game of Connect 4 first, and then I lost, and then he took my wallet, I'd be like, well, you know, he kinda earned it at that point. So really, they've only assaulted Ash about 10 times throughout the series. But now, let's talk about weapons, because they have a lot of weapons that are illegal. For example, they have 10 counts of just using explosives that I don't think they have licenses for, especially using them in public places, which is 9 years of jail time each. Because of these weapons, they've caused a lot of property destruction, which, if it's a government facility or even private facility, sometimes can be 10 years of jail time each. And there were shrines that they destroyed to Tornadus, Thundurus, Lombre, you know, all the legendary Pokemon. And anyone who's ever watched the Pokemon anime knows, Team Rocket loves giant robots. But is owning a Pokemon-themed Gundam actually a crime? Well, obviously, it's not, actually. It's not in the US. You could freely build a giant mech in your garage, and it's not a crime unless there's a certain circumstance. Obviously, any of the crimes you commit while in the mech are still considered crimes, such as burglary, but the robot itself isn't illegal unless it can fire projectiles. This includes nets, its arms, what have you, because now that's an illegal firearm. But in Team Rocket's case, most of their mechs just reach out their arms to physically grab a Pokemon or trap them in a box. I don't know if the Pokemon writers were aware of this, or maybe it has to do with some sort of TV guidelines, but we can't actually give Team Rocket jail time for owning all of these mechs. You could just say they're for utility or heavy-duty construction equipment. God bless the United States of Unova for our freedom and our mechas. In actuality, and I went through the Wikipedia page just to double check, less than 10 of Team Rocket's mechs can be considered actual weapons and be charged with illegal firing of missiles, which is 15 years of jail time each. Which is wild considering how many different mechs there are. There are so many, it has its own Bulbapedia page just to list them all. Because of that, surprisingly, this violent crime section is going to be the smallest amount yet, with 1,200 1,793.5 years of jail time, bringing Team Rocket's current sentence up to 4,703.5 years, which is huge, but it's about to get bigger, because now we have the final section of crimes. It has the least amount of total crimes, but the largest amount of cumulative jail years. Yar! This is the section where I have decided to sort all of Team Rocket's various accounts of piracy and terrorism. So naturally, we're gonna have a lot of lifetime sentences. Now, while terrorism is a bit harder to define, I've used this as a catch-all for a lot of crimes which definitely feel like they deserve a life sentence, but aren't specifically outlawed. You know, things such as firebombing Pallet Town, stealing a skyscraper twice, hijacking a bridge, a train, a boat, a space shuttle? How do you charge sabotaging a space shuttle? And of course, they destroyed an oil pipeline. There are 7 different times they sabotage a power plant. 7 times! That's not a full lifetime sentence, but it is 20 years for conspiracy to disrupt the power plant, which is a crime that I didn't know existed. Now, while terrorism is very loosely defined, there is a hard definition for piracy under the law of nations. And you know it's legit because that sounds cool as fuck. The Law of Nation defines piracy as any illegal acts of violence or detention, or any act of depredation committed for private ends by the crew or the passengers of a private ship or private aircraft, on the high seas or against another ship or aircraft. Now, if you're like me and you're thinking, holy crap, is that vague? You'd be absolutely goddamn right it's vague. So you're telling me any crime for financial gain aboard a ship counts as piracy, and by US law will result in a lifetime sentence. You try to kidnap Pikachu on land, 3 years in prison. You try to capture Pikachu on a boat, 85 years. And because so many Pokemon regions have large water areas, there are a lot of boats that they try to commit crimes aboard throughout 16 separate acts of piracy, with a lifetime sentence for each. Piracy alone will bring Team Rocket another 1,306 years of jail time. Yeah, eat shit, Luffy. We know who the real pirates are. Once you add in all the other counts of terrorism and various conspiracies, Team Rocket in the YAR section alone have earned 2,600 years of jail time, bringing their total jail time from all 4 sections to 7,304 years. That is the 11th largest jail sentence in the history of the world. For some perspective, that is 86 life sentences for Jesse and James, and 457 for Meowth, because he's a cat. I've also broken down the average crimes per episode by region so we can see what seasons the writers were actively making them hardened criminals. This way we can tell that as the show went on, Team Rocket started to commit crimes less and less. In Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn, they were really in their menace era. They were committing crimes all the time and continuing to do that, but doing it less often once you get to Sinnoh, Unova, and Kalos. Once you get to Alola and Journeys, they're essentially just regular citizens that will every once in a while start a false business. Most of their crimes in Alola are just, you know, catching wild Pokemon or infiltrating a school play, or they help save the world a couple times. I did charge them with vigilantism, but you know. However, there is a sole outlier to this if we look a bit farther, and that is the Orange Island Archipelago. Because it is an archipelago, they commit a whole lot of piracy this season, which is why the average jail time per episode is about 3 times higher than any other region. It's not an official league, that's what I'm saying. It's a pirate state, nobody likes it. The league isn't official, and nobody remembers Tracy Sketchit but me. This episode in particular earned them 185 years of jail time, titled The Relicanth Really Can. The episode is innocent enough. Ash, Brock, May, and Max team up with a researcher to find sunken treasure beneath the sea where they encounter a bunch of problems in Pokemon, and Team Rocket also wants to find the lost treasure. That in itself is not a crime, but there is about a 15-second period where they are in 2 separate submarines, and in an attempt to stop the twerps from finding treasure, they fire a torpedo at the other submarine. Not only is this a missile, which is 15 years of jail time, this is also considered piracy based on the definition we read before, and I can only assume that this is attempted murder. If the submarine breaks, they're all gonna die. That totals to about 185 years. So yeah, maybe Team Rocket are better criminals than we make them out to be. They're master terrorist, pirates, burglars, racketeers, small business owners. But you wanna know who the real criminal is? Ash goddamn Ketchum. Like I said earlier, there are a lot of times where Team Rocket don't actually commit crimes, they just try to catch wild Pokemon. Whether this be Whoopers, Scythers, or straight up just wild Pikachus, and Ash decides that he doesn't like that, so he sends them blasting off again. That's assault. Sometimes they're not even trying to catch a Pokemon. They'll just be watching Ash train, watching a gym battle, or just minding their own business having a picnic, and a stray Pikachu lightning bolt will hit them and cause them to explode. By my count, the current world Pokemon champion and his Pikachu have committed 59 counts of assault against Jesse, James, and Meowth! That's right! And with a charge of 4 years per assault sentence, I move that based on his 236 years of jail time, that his status of champion be revoked. We put Pikachu down. Don't put Pikachu down. I heard that as was coming out of my mouth. But send Ash to juvie. I rest my case.